Hey San Diego Rep family, how are y'all doing? I'm Kim Heil, I'm the associate producer and casting director, and today I'm going to be talking with someone really special, and I'm hoping that she joins us soon. So there she is. So Viterbi, can you please join? Hey Herbert, can you please ask to join, and then I will bring you into our interview. Let's see here. Wow, a lot of people joining. Thank you so much for being here tonight. There we go. All right. Yay, Turby. Hey, Samantha. All right. Hey.
Hi, Kim. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a crazy time, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's great to see you.
Great to see you too. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And, in lieu of seeing you in person, which I would prefer, thank goodness for modern technology allowing us to do these kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
So how have you been holding up through everything?
Oh, that is a great question. It's been a challenging time for so many reasons, for our country, for theater, for everyone personally. I would say that every day, I think my mood outlook on life is like this,
Tell me
I think
about
a lot
it.
of us are. I feel like I go through a roller coaster of emotions every day, but all is well here. I'm lucky to be healthy and safe. I just graduated Monday from my MFA program.
Congratulations!
Thank you. So somehow that all happened even in this digital platform. I've been teaching undergrad playwriting on Zoom, doing rehearsals on Zoom. It's like a brave new world, but I'm grateful for any opportunity, including talking to you and getting to premiere.
That's really exciting. Congratulations. I know that's a huge milestone. It's a 3-year program, right?
Yes.
So, wow. So now you're officially an adult, I guess?
Or something. If that's what having a MFA means, then yeah.
Exactly.
I'll take
You're
that.
all grown up. But let's talk about one of the projects that you have been working on. The Jewish Arts Festival that San Diego Rep has been producing for, goodness gracious, 27 years now?
Yeah, it's our 27th year.
Yeah, it's crazy. So tell us a little bit about your history with J-Fest, as we call it.
Sure. So I'm actually 27 years old, so I have not been a part of it from the very beginning, although I feel like I've grown up with it. My first involvement with J-Fest was actually my first involvement with the San Diego Rep. When I was a sophomore in high school, I believe, I was 15. I auditioned for this little show called The Blessing of a Broken Heart that the San Diego Rep was putting on, and Todd Salave was directing. And I got in, and it was my first little professional gig as an actor. And it was just this beautiful experience to be working on a show that meant so much to me personally as a Jewish woman. And somehow Todd, I think because I was writing a lot backstage, found out that I was a playwright. I mean, I was 15, so I was kind of a playwright. But
sure.
He found out I was a playwright, and he had this little idea for a project called Women of Valor. I guess he had done a version of Women of Valor honoring someone at a gala for, I believe, the Agency of Jewish Education, but it was a small 10-minute thing. And he had this idea to turn it into a performance. We thought it would just be 1 year. We had no idea it would have an 11-year-long life. And it kind of started with him, me, and his daughter, Leah Salave, sitting at the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf in the Ralphs in La Jolla, just sitting there, drinking coffee and thinking, okay, so what can this be? How do we make this Woman of Valor, which is the idea is to honor incredible, remarkable women in the San Diego Jewish community who are pillars of the community and share their stories. So I got involved as a writer when I was 15. And then I would say about 7 years ago, I believe, I was in college, and Todd, who is the artistic director of the Jewish Arts Festival, said he needed an associate producer for the festival, or maybe it was assistant producer at the time. And I knew the festival because I had been working on Women of Valor, but I had no idea I was not a producer. I didn't know how to produce. I had no idea what that entailed. but I was really eager. I was, on the East Coast, and I was really eager to get back involved with the theater community in San Diego and the large Jewish community in San Diego. And it felt like a perfect intersection of all of my interests and passions. And so I was like, okay, sure. I know nothing about how to do budgeting or how to book people or, anything like that. But I jumped on board, and I've been the associate producer now for 7 years. And I kind of joke with Todd that every year he gives me more and more responsibility as I kind of learn a little bit better how to do my job. But yeah, that's my journey with the festival.
Well, producing really is a learning by doing. It's hard to even imagine, like, if you were to write a book about how to do it, it's like, how do you write that book? Because every project is different. Yeah. So yeah, I think that really what is most important is the passion and enthusiasm for the project, which you definitely have. But let's talk a little bit about Women of Valor, because some people might not know what it is. Having seen Women of Valor now for a few years, I always look forward to seeing it. It's always just so moving. I cry more than once,
Me too.
It's very inspiring also. In fact, it's interesting as a woman, I remember some of these stories. And when I think of some of the things that the women I've listened to, that I remember, it really is a roadmap for how to do amazing, important things in your community. So tell me about that process of what is Women of Valor and what's so special about it.
Yeah, so I'll start with the former. Women of Valor is traditionally, I'll give the caveat, not this year, but traditionally is a live theatrical performance in a theater where we honor and profile 6 remarkable Jewish women in the San Diego community, and we share their stories. So the process is usually we have a team of 5 writers, including myself and including Todd. That's changed a little bit over the years. It started with Todd, Leigh, and I, and now we have some more writers. But we pick the women that we're going to feature, and that started at first with just really like, who are amazing women? We want to get to know their stories a little bit more. We look at like the big Jewish organizations in town, who's running them. But over the years, because it's grown a little bit of a community around Women of Valor, we often have people recommending women as well.
Sure.
So we start by interviewing them, and these interviews can go anywhere from an hour to, I think I had one once that was 4 or 5 hours.
Oh my gosh.
And we have kind of guiding questions that I put together that kind of ask them about their childhood, if they had a mentor growing up, what their relationship to Judaism is, what they consider to be meaningful work, if they've had any major kind of tests in their life and how they've healed from those tests. But those questions are really more of a guide. And it's really what comes out of the conversation you're having with someone. And then we transcribe those interviews, which can go up to, 60, 70 pages of transcriptions. And we create a narrative all using verbatim text from these interviews. So kind of in the style of Anna Devere Smith and that long tradition of verbatim theater, we take these interviews and we compile them into narrative monologues. And then we also have music. We have a singer and a violinist who have been pretty much the same since the beginning, Milo Wingard and Danny Myers. And then we take photographs from the women's life as well. And so that's kind of the structure of it. It's music, it's images, it's these monologues, and then we have kind of group sections with all the women centered around different themes. So what does the term Woman of Valor mean to you? What advice do you have to young women? And it's been an incredibly meaningful experience for me. I'm getting emotional thinking about it. But I started this, when I was 16, 15.
Wow.
So I really grew up with this project. I started in high school. I kept doing it every year in college and beyond. And through interviewing, right from the beginning, I was doing the interviewing myself. Todd is an incredible mentor in that way, and that he really empowers us, even when we're young, to kind of jump in there and figure it out. And I feel like I really learned from these women how to be in this world. a young woman when I started this project, and I thought and I dreamed of how you can make an impact on your community, how you can incorporate Jewish values and Jewish life into your work, into your practice, into your family. And I feel like I go back through these interviews and I'm like, oh, I learned this from that woman and I learned this from that woman. It's really been incredible to see how much of my growth has come from learning from these incredible women. They really were and continue to be my role models in terms of a map for how I want to be as a woman, as a Jewish woman in this world.
So you said traditionally it's been done live, obviously,
yes,
with actors presenting these monologues to a live audience. How are we doing it this year?
Great question. So at first we were like, oh no, the Jewish Arts Festival is always May through July and we can't gather right now. It's not safe and it's not ethical to do that. So immediately, our first instinct could have been, okay, so we won't do one this year. But we had already started. We had picked the women, we had started these interviews, and we felt, I'll speak for myself, but I feel that it is more essential than ever right now to hear these stories of strength and inspiration and resilience. It's a time where I personally am looking for a little bit of resilience and a little bit of, and so we really, really wanted to find a way to share this with the community. So we're doing it in a series of 6 videos. So usually we honor 6 women in one continuous evening of theater, but now we're doing it in 6 videos. But it will have all of the same ingredients that you would see live. So you'll have violin and song and music and photographs and actors playing these women, which is always a very bizarre experience for our Women of Valor. And we'll still have the group sections, and they'll be released in 6 chunks. So one honoring each of our selected Women of Valor. And I have to just give a shout out to my assistant producer and co-producer on this project, Becca Meyers, who, like me, grew up with it. And she is really a force, and I'm excited for all that she's going to accomplish. But more specifically in the context of this project, she has a lot of video editing skills that even I really am too old to have. I haven't really ever learned. And so her and I have kind of co-directed this piece in that I've shaped what I think they'll look like, but she actually does a lot of the labor of putting it together, making it look pretty. And so it was really a collaborative effort, as Women of Valor always is. But we were determined to make this happen online, and we hope that an advantage, perhaps, or a silver lining of this moment is that, in the theater, we do it in the space at the Rep, and you can only get so many people in that space.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that maybe one silver lining of this is that in digital form, we can reach people that don't live in San Diego, that live all over, that can look to these women and see their strength and their resilience and take that with them in these challenging times.
Yeah. I can't believe I've never suggested this to Todd, but as you were speaking, I just came up with the idea that you guys have to collect all these beautiful monologues and transform them into a series of essays, into a book, and then publish it, because I know that just in terms of inspiration, like you were saying, and particularly stories of resilience, I know I've heard stories of Holocaust survivors, who were women of valor, and those stories, especially at a time right now when we're really just examining humanity and what it means, like you said, to be alive right now. Those stories do present a kind of model for how to be strong and how to persevere, and so I just love the idea that there could be, when you were saying how recording those stories is such a great benefit of the time right now. It's a silver lining, but let's take that an extra step and put it in writing, and that way more people can experience it.
Absolutely. We thought about that for years. So if there are any publishers watching right now, hit us up. But we would love to. We have actually, as of this year, we have exactly 70 women that we have profiled for 11 years. And it's women, some of whom are no longer with us.
Right.
Some of whom the stories maybe the only way that their story's been heard, aside from in the memories of those loved, are in my archive on my computer. So it seems silly that it should just sit in this folder on my computer and not be shared with the world. So I know that we would love to put it in writing, absolutely. And we're hoping that we can really use this time to our advantage beyond the next 2 weeks to maybe put out more videos from archive materials of Women of Valor, women that we featured back in 2000 and I think 9 or 8 or 7 was the first year, something like that. Really go back and share those stories.
Absolutely. And you have some mother and daughter pairs too, don't you?
We do. We have some years a mother and daughter have been in the same year, and some years we'll do a mother and 5 years later a daughter. We've had sisters, we've had best friends. Even this year we have someone, our Holocaust survivor that we're featuring. Her story is very powerful and important, and I encourage everyone to tune into Pearl Rech's story. But she mentions a Woman of Valor we did before, and it's so funny how this community really just keeps growing, and you see how connected it really is.
You know, one of the things I really appreciate about the storytelling that you do in Women of Valor is that some of these women are really high profile. They're very visible, not just in the Jewish community, but the San Diego community at large. And oftentimes we'll see them very much, you know, in their public face, that they're in this role that is, you know, hardworking and, you know, having to do with either government or policy or education or community. And then Women of Valor makes them people, you know, and I don't mean that to say they were people before, but just that you humanize them in a way that suddenly you can kind of see how you as a person, and I'm pointing to myself, but as a woman, how we have a lot more in common than not. And I have loved that. I've loved that. I have to tell you though, the one story, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember her name, but the one story that I just love, and honestly, I think about constantly, I think it was either last year or 2 years ago, there was a group of students who, for one reason or another, they were here in the United States on a trip, and their housing didn't work out. So then she ended up having to house them in her house, and there were like 70 of them. Yeah. And I can't help it. I have a hard time with like 3 people in my house, you know? And she had 70. And I just kept thinking, well, people must have slept in the hallways, and how did she feed all of them? I mean, it was so impactful for me. Anyway.
Oh, I love that. I love that anecdote. What's so remarkable about these women too is, like you were saying, they have this public face. I mean, we featured Congresswoman Susan Davis, right? We featured Cindy Martin, who's the superintendent of the San Diego School District, right? These people with really public personas, and we get to learn these crazy stories of them in their being real heroes, or as we say, mensches, in their personal life. The story you told reminds me of one of the videos we're releasing in just a few weeks, and I won't spoil anything, but one of our honorees, Revitson Heil, she has this story of hosting a Passover that she thought was going to be for 40 people, and then it turned out to be for 60 people. It was 90 people, and she found this all out within an hour before Passover starts. And so I just think it's incredible. What I really learned from these women is just their generosity and their ability to roll with the punches, roll with the change, and allow that change to open up their hearts even bigger towards their communities. I just think that's so inspiring.
It's incredible. It's really incredible. Well, I think, though, I want to focus on the woman behind the Women of Valor, and that's you. And I just want to commend you, you know, for all the wonderful work you've done over the years, not just for Women of Valor, but also for the Jewish Arts Festival. You are also a playwright.
Yes.
I am a big fan of your writing. So, and now you're, like we said earlier, you're now a playwright with a degree. You were always a playwright, apparently, since
whatever that means. Yeah.
But tell us, what's next for you as a playwright?
That's a great question. I think I always kind of had a plan, and then everything that's happened in the last few months has taught me that plans are great when they can motivate you to make goals for yourself, but you have to a little bit surrender to whatever happens.
Yeah.
So I had plans of having a production of my play in the fall, of my play that started at the San Diego Rep in Every Generation, but that's not going to happen anymore because we won't be able to gather in the fall, most likely. So I don't know what's next, to be honest with you. I hope I'm finding this moment very inspiring in a lot of different ways, and really forcing me to focus on what stories are important to me and what stories I want to tell. So I know I will keep writing and look forward to a day when we can gather together in live theater. But for now, I'm also excited about other forms, you know, moving into television, dramatic storytelling for different mediums, doing something like Woman of Valor has been really incredibly fulfilling to see that the work that I've been trained to do as a playwright can transfer. It's really just storytelling. It's really just dramatic storytelling. And that I think that can transfer to a lot of different mediums. So while I had a plan, that plan is no longer set. So I'm a little bit surrendering to whatever may come.
Why playwriting? I should have started with that question, by the way. But like, you know, you said that you were introduced to San Diego Rep through Blessings of a Broken Heart. What was it that drew you to playwriting? Because it sounds like maybe the lure of the stage kind of started with you.
As
also.
it does. Yeah. Yeah.
So how did that?
The kind of story that I've told about this, or that I imagine for myself, is that I've kind of always been a playwright when I was really little. I don't know if my sisters are watching, but if they are, I'm about to shout them out. I used to write plays for them to perform, often Wizard of Oz sequels for us to perform, or at Shabbat for my parents, or with my Barbie dolls. I was always telling stories, and I always was excited to see those stories inhabited by people. That was like a form of storytelling that I found very moving, even when I was like 3 years old. And so I was always writing, but then I also started acting at a very young age. When I was 4 years old, I was in my first show as an actor. And a little bit of a tangent, but the reason I got into theater in general was I was an extremely shy kid, like very, very shy, so much so that when I was in kindergarten, I can't believe I'm about to say this publicly, but I was too embarrassed to ask the teacher to go to the bathroom to raise my hand, so I would pee my pants in front of my kindergarten classroom. And my mom, who is the wisest woman of valor I know, she had the great, had the great knowledge that, oh, this is a kid that really loves storytelling, that really loves performing, but is really, really shy. So she was like, you need to get in theater. That would be good for you. And I was always obsessed with singing. I would sing in the car. I would write these plays for my Barbie dolls. So I auditioned for the J Company's production of Annie Get Your Gun, and I was in the ensemble, and I just loved it. And it really did help a lot with my shyness, and also I like that passion that had always been there was really ignited. So I really started, so from the time I was a very young child, I was acting and I was writing, and that continued all the way through high school, through college. Both the writing, although I stopped writing for my Barbie dolls, you know, I started writing for humans. And thanks to a lot of wonderful mentorship from teachers I had, from directors, including Todd, including the rep, kind of collectively, I kept doing both professionally. And it came to a point after I graduated college, and in college I did both writing and acting.
What did you major in?
I majored in theater studies.
Okay.
And then I focused in both playwriting and acting.
Okay.
Kind of a senior project in both. And so then I moved to New York afterwards, and I was kind of on that audition grind, and I was also trying to write plays, and I found that it was really, really difficult to do both. And I wasn't giving attention or time to either in a way that felt meaningful for me. And I think it's really, I really, like, as a writer, I just love actors so much because it is so hard to be an actor.
Yeah.
It's hard to do anything in this field, but it's just being an actor is really, really tough, which is why they're so lucky when you have people like you, casting directors, that really look out for actors. But I found that really challenging for me personally, for my mental health, and I felt like I had a real voice as a playwright. It was something I always loved to do, and I felt like it deserved the time and attention to focus on that. So that's kind of how I transitioned full-time into playwriting. But theater for me has always been that calling that I've had since I was 4, in whatever medium it took. And I just feel really, really lucky and grateful and privileged that I've gotten to pursue it as a career.
Let's talk about your voice as a playwright. You mentioned your voice as a playwright. How did you find that? And every time someone refers to a playwright's voice, and then, you know, if someone says, well, tell me more about it, or what does that mean? I'm always at a loss for words, because it is such an abstract concept, although I know the playwright's voice when I read it.
Right.
So I'm wondering what your take on it is and how you would define your voice.
Yeah, I think it's something that is truthfully still evolving, you know, and I think that's the beauty of being a writer, hopefully with a long life and career, is that you're always kind of finding new ways to lean into that voice or stray from that voice or innovate on it. But I would say that most of my plays, every play is different in terms of form or style or structure, but I find myself returning to the same stories over and over again. And if I had to put my finger on what those stories are, is that I write a lot about the way that time and memory kind of complicate our narratives around history. So specifically the kind of changing landscape of American history, and I see that through a Jewish lens and through a female lens, obviously. But I really think that whether I'm writing a play about Jewish refugees celebrating Passover, or a play about reality TV and the Bachelor franchise and female virginity, I think both of those stories are really about how time and memory complicate the stories we tell about ourselves. So that's a long-winded way of saying that I return to the same themes over and over again. But I think as a storyteller, what I'm most interested in is a kind of storytelling that is generous and generative, that really looks towards community as the foundation of what these stories, who they are for and what they are for. And I would say I actually learned that, and I'm not just saying this to you, from the rep and from working at the Jewish Arts Festival. It became very important to me early on that I understood who the community was that I was writing for and what kind of community I wanted to create with my work. There's this idea in Jewish tradition of something called a minyan, which is that you need a quorum of at least 10 people in order to say certain prayers, to gather, to fully express yourselves to God. And I loved that idea, that I think storytelling can foster that same sense of like fullest spiritual potential, that you can create stories, you can be in a theater and have people feeling the same things and thinking about the same questions. And that to me really creates a community for those 2 hours, but then also beyond, when you carry those conversations that you leave the theater with in the car afterwards, or when you think about it over the next few days or weeks. And so to me, I think my goal when I always try to write a play is how can I create a community around this play? And so no matter what I'm writing about, that kind of outward facing, generous theater that I'm interested in.
Where do you get your ideas?
I wish I knew. The easy answer to that is from my life. I think every writer would probably say some version of that. But I think I get ideas from the things that happen to me day to day. For one, I keep a notebook, and if I'm feeling something, I journal it down, and hopefully it's useful later. But also just from the world around me, responding to what's happening, what I feel are the urgent questions of the moment. And sometimes it will really be just a question that I'm thinking about. I'll give the example with my play that I keep mentioning about The Bachelor, Shame Spiral. I was obsessed with the Bachelor franchise for years and years and years, and I felt a lot of shame for that obsession. And I was like, oh God, okay, so I've dedicated so much of my life to this like deeply problematic, in my opinion, franchise. And how do I turn all of that, what I called like wasted hours of shame, into something productive, into art? And so that's where that idea came from. I was just like, let me write down things I know about The Bachelor. And that's where that play came from. And then In Every Generation came from really my family's personal history through the war, through growing up through my grandparents being in Italy, and through my own experience of like how beautiful and meaningful I find the holiday of Passover. So all of those things kind of converged. Yeah, so it's really like things that happen to me or things I notice. I wouldn't say there's like a one size fits all for every play idea, and I want to credit actually my my mentor in graduate school, Naomi, who has us every week in class pitch a play idea. And I was like, how am I going to come up with new play ideas every single week? I can barely like finish the play I'm trying to write for some other thing. But it's really a practice is what she's taught me. Right. That you have ideas, they are everywhere. And if you just get in the practice of every day writing down an idea, some of them are going to be total garbage. You know, some of them will never see the light of day, but often a lot of them contain seeds of really exciting things that maybe won't look like the initial idea or the initial impulse, but they'll turn into something else. Yeah.
So take me through your process. Are you what do they say, a pantser, or do you know what I'm talking about? Like you write by the seat of your pants, just la 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 la, or do you outline and plan it out and then go?
I would say both and neither.
Okay, fair enough.
I start by just going, just writing. I have usually like a character or a relationship in mind. So I'm like, oh, I want to write about these two sisters. And I start to just kind of, and as I write, I start to learn more about them. And usually the first things I write get scrapped because when I started writing, I didn't know anything about who these people are, what world they lived in. But I start to get to hear the characters' voices and their relationship in my mind. And then I would say about like halfway to 2/3 of the way through what I think is going to be a first draft, I outline. I sit down and I outline. I'm like, okay, I have these scenes written already. I might have a sense of what the ending might be, but I don't know how to get from point B to point C. So then I start to think of what are other scenes that could be involved in the world of this play. Sometimes that takes the form of like a Word document on my computer. Sometimes it's random journaling. Sometimes it's note cards on like plastered on a bulletin board. But I would say that I start really flying by the seat of my pants, and then as I am writing, some kind of structure emerges to me, and that's when I follow the more like rigorous outlining phase.
So when you wrote, for instance, that scene with the two sisters, you didn't know where in the script it would live.
Yeah, and so I would say like, this is all, it's interesting for me to think through because it's a mystery even to me. But I would say that about half the plays I write, I start from the beginning. Like within Every Generation, I knew it was going to start at the beginning of this certain part of the Passover Seder. I always knew that's how it was going to start. So I started from the beginning of that. Like with another play I wrote, Period Sisters, I knew it was going to start at the beginning of a sorority rush process because I had in my mind that it was going to take place over one academic year, and I understood the chronology. But I would say the other half of my plays, I have no idea where I'm starting. Like Shame Spiral, I just started writing down things I knew about The Bachelor, and those turned into scenes. And then at the end, I was like, truthfully, with that play and another play, I like put the note cards down in front of me and I start to shuffle them. I'm like, oh, it would be interesting if this scene happened next to this scene because there's some kind of emotional contrast to them. Or it makes sense, this scene is about, I don't know, blue, and this scene is also about teal, and so that kind of makes sense to, that's a silly example, but that kind of
but I get it.
Yeah. So I would say like some plays that are more, I would say, structurally rigorous or that follow a certain degree of a timeline, I usually start at the beginning. But plays that are more, I would say, experimental in their form, I often start wherever inspires me.
Okay. Who are the playwrights or plays that inspire you?
So many. I will say these are not, I'm not just paying lip service to the rep, but my favorite playwright is Julia Cho. Todd did a beautiful production of Aubergine at the rep, a year ago, 2 years ago. Yeah, and I love her entire body of work. I think Aubergine is the most beautiful play. There's lyricism to her writing and a real emotional core that I'm I think her writing is incredibly generous and incredibly community driven. I love her play, The Language Archive. I would say I really also love playwrights whose, when you look at their careers, no two plays are alike. I'm thinking of like Brandon Jacobs Jenkins, who I just every one of his plays, and they're wildly different.
Oh my God, it's so true. I have to say, I just read, well, not just, but I read Octoroon and I read Gloria.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I think Gloria.
Anyway.
Yeah, so his plays are so different. And I just read last week, I saw it in New York, but we read it for class, Everybody. And that's like a totally different play from either of those. So I'm really impressed by that. I always have loved Paula Vogel from the time I was very young. Her writing is so beautiful. And I would say that her play Indecent has inspired almost everything I've written since I saw it. I just think it's a remarkable piece of theater.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. I could go, this is so fun for me. I mean, I can go on and on. Playwright.
Okay, well, so playwrights, plays, that's easy. But, you know, you mentioned your addiction to The Bachelor, which I completely, for me, it's not The Bachelor. I have my own problematic, TV film addictions. But let's talk about storytelling in film, for instance. What are some movies you love that maybe inform your way of storytelling?
Yeah, I would say that I have a stronger relationship to television than I do to film.
Television,
Maybe
sure.
I can talk about film. I mean, like, with film, whatever, these are all guilty pleasures, but I love rom-coms. I've always loved rom-coms. Like, I love stories that have happy endings in a film. I think I go to theater to cry. I watch movies to like.
Oh, that's so true. That's so interesting. Yeah, I'm probably the same.
Yeah, but in terms of television, I would say, like, there's so much I love right now. There's so much good TV. I would say my favorite TV show of all time ever is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I think that informs a lot of my work. But right now, I really love Fleabag. I love, Fleabag is so good. So good. I love Never Have I Ever. I just totally binged.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
It's so good. It's like Mindy Kaling's new YA show. It's phenomenal. I love if you look at all the TV I love, there's so many different styles. But I love really character-driven TV shows. That's what Buffy was so incredible to me, is you get to watch these characters grow up, essentially, and you stay with them through all of their well-crafted changes as they get older. And I mean, as a storyteller, that's what I love too. I love things that are character-focused. I never start with maybe with the exception of the Bachelor play, but I never start with ideas or concepts. I always start with character. So I like watching things that reflect that.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned earlier that, you had considered that maybe TV has some appeal for you as a writer, that maybe at some point you would perhaps write for television. If so, do you think that your style of writing would somehow change? Or do you think that, because I find that your writing is inherently theatrical.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that's something that you hope to be able to bring to the TV medium.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of playwrights are maybe, or at least I'll speak for myself, or we're like afraid, if you write for TV, is it going to change the way you write for theater? Is it going to make it more cinematic and less theatrical? But I would say in the writing that I've done for television, it's been so important to my work as a playwright, because I think it's made me a better playwright, because it allows me, I inherently use the theatrical form more because I'm learning to write in a different style. And when I think of a story now, I think, oh, is this a story that's better suited for TV, for film, or for theater, right? Because there's not, a story that works really well on stage is not always going to translate to a movie or a TV show. So I think my work in TV and film has really made me a more theatrical writer, and vice versa. My work in theater has made me more a kind of episodic thinker in television. So I think that I think theater is magical. You know, there's no way to translate the magic of theater, that feeling of people together in a room, to television. But I think what's so exciting about TV and film right now is there is a lot of playwrights in those writers' rooms that are really innovating the form, and not in a way that makes it theatrical, but taking the kind of traditional old school style of TV and making it something new and something fresh. So, yeah.
I totally agree with that. In fact, when I think of your play In Every Generation, I see it as presenting a sort of visual language that you've created for the audience. It's like a lens that we see the story unfold through. And that visual language is one that I think that I've seen a little bit more play out in other mediums. The visual language of In Every Generation is very unique to that story, but just in terms of I guess it's called magical realism, or just that sense of like everything is not necessarily always bound in the real world.
Yeah.
And I find that very exciting, and I wonder if that can be attributed to playwrights, migrating between both worlds of theater and TV.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that, and everyone will say this to you, but when you're a writer, the most important part of your work isn't actually writing, it's consuming, it's watching, it's reading. And I would say like a lot of my magical realism impulses come from books I love. I love Murakami and like 100 Days of Solitude, all these books that really take magic and make them magical realism, So I would say that the more you read, the more you watch, just the better you are as a writer, because you have a lot more tools at your disposal.
That sounds a lot like advice, which actually is a brilliant segue into my next question. It was going to be, what would you say to someone, and I am thinking actually in particular, really young people, like, maybe middle school, high school, who've discovered that they have a love or an interest in theater, but they don't know yet how they fit in to the world of theater. Maybe they're not as confident, aren't confident enough to be on stage, but, they don't know yet about playwriting. They don't know yet about directing. Like, what would you say to those kids?
Yeah, well, I'll first say that I'm 27 and have an MFA in playwriting, and I'd still like to know the answer to that. But if I have, as a playwriting teacher, I've learned how to teach these tools, and I've had to mentor students in this way. And I think the first piece of advice I would say is read and watch as much as possible. Truly, see as much theater as you can, watch as many movies as you can, read as many books, because that will be your toolbox. I will also say I have really, really been privileged to have a lot of incredible mentors in my life. If it weren't for Todd Salovey telling me that I could be a writer when I was 15, I don't know if I would be a writer, frankly. And Todd's not the only one. I've had incredible teachers and mentors over the years. And I would say you have to seek those out. You can, I felt I was lucky that Todd kind of happened to me because I auditioned for this play. But it wasn't a coincidence that I was in the dressing room writing plays. There's a great deal of luck in this, but I very much encourage you to seek out mentors, people that can help you along this, because unfortunately or fortunately, there's no one way to be a playwright. There's no one path. I wish it were that simple. You could go to grad school and then you'd be a playwright, or you could move to New York and then you'd be a playwright. There's no one way of doing it. And you can get 100 playwrights in a room and every single one of them will have a different path. So gather as much, talk to as many people as you can, find your teachers. And I would also say find your community. The only way writing can't exist in a vacuum, you need actors, you need designers, you need directors. And and seek out those collaborations, because those collaborations are going to be everything to you as a writer. I have a dear friend who is a dramaturg named Gabrielle Hoyt, and from the very beginning of my journey as a writer, you know, in college, the first thing I would do when I finished a play was I would send it to her. Have that friend, have that person that you can send that play to and get feedback on. So I'm very, very grateful that I've had a lot of people in my life that have really mentored me and challenged me as a writer. And then I will say the last thing too, whatever advice I can give, is that to be a writer, you also have to be a human. You know, you can do so much reading about, you can read a lot of stuff, you can read how to write, you can take classes, but ultimately the place where inspiration lies is just from living and putting yourself in uncomfortable situations often, or just going through the ups and downs, trials and tribulations of being a human in the world. And I think this was something when I started grad school that Naomi said to us, is she said, you know, I'm going to teach you, we're going to learn about playwriting, but you also should take these 3 years to learn about yourself. Take a dance class, learn how to surf, whatever it is, like live as much as possible, because all of that will be fodder for your writing.
That's
think of anything else, but
that's brilliant. No, I'm going to be like, here, I have a 14-year-old daughter, and I'm going to have her listen to that part. Actually, I'm going to have her listen to everything. But you said earlier that, you know, just like everyone else, plans have been upended, you know, plans for the future. Really, none of us know exactly how things are going to be, you know, even a week from now. It's that uncertain. But I would love to know what your hope is for theater, for our community. Like, what are some of the things that you've placed your hope in?
Yeah, I think that this is a really important moment for theater. I think that we're learning that the structures and institutions that have supported and supported what is the American theater are not working. They don't survive in a pandemic. They don't uplift all of the voices that needed to be uplifted. And I feel that we have this opportunity when theaters are shut down to really take stock of what do we want our theater to be? What do we want the future of the American theater to be like? And I say that to theaters, but I say that to myself too. What are my obligations as a writer? How can I use this time when I'm not actively in rehearsal to be thinking about my work? And I think that this moment is it's a critical juncture for American theater in particular, but for theater everywhere, where we have this opportunity to say, why is the old structure not working? Who is it serving? Who is it for? And what does that mean as we all envision when theater comes back, what that will look like? And I think theaters are inside of that question right now. I don't have answers, or truthfully, in this moment, I don't have a vision for what that is. But I do know that for me personally, you know, theater is, as I've said, it's something I've done since I was 4 years old, and you take that for granted. I grew up in a rehearsal room. I saw a lot of theater because I was in school and there's a lot of theater to be seen. But I know for me personally, that's something I won't take for granted when we're able to gather again together in person. And my responsibility as a writer, as an artist, is also something that I will not take for granted. So I am hopeful that we will see really positive change in the theater moving forward in terms of what voices are uplifted, what voices are ignored. And, you know, something I really admire and respect about the Rep is that your mission and the theater is for the community in which you are living. It is directly for the San Diego community. And I think that's something that I always say, you know, that's something I try to do in my work, but it's really important for every theater to be thinking about, who is this for? Who are we serving? And I'm just hopeful that this will be a moment that will inspire those questions.
Well, Allie, it's been such a joy to talk to you.
You too.
And I thank you for all your work, everything you've done for the Rep. I'm so proud to be able to call you part of, one of the rep family, and in some ways, one of the what's the word I'm looking for? The not founder, but one of the people who kind of led the charge with Women of Valor, and creators certainly, but also someone who made it what it is today. And I'm in awe, quite frankly, of the work that you've done. And I know one day, hopefully sooner than later, we're going to present your work, your plays, not just but plays on our stage. And that is something I'm so looking forward to when we get to do that. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Kim. You know how much I love the rep, and I'm so excited for everyone listening to watch Women of Valor.
Yes, can't wait.
Released tonight at 7:30 on YouTube, and they'll be coming out every few days for the next 2 weeks. But thank you so much. I think the work the rep is doing is so important, and I just feel very, very honored and grateful to be a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you take care, and I'll see you soon.
Yes.
And, keep the faith.
That's all we can do. Yeah.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.